Look at that wrapping.
Okay, here goes nothing. I'm pulling the ribbon now.
Oh my gosh, what is it?
They walked into the Denver airport to fly home. Minutes later, they disappeared. Their week-long vacation had come to an end, and a mix of tiredness and excitement danced across their faces. The smell of coffee and the faint scent of jet fuel mingled in the air, giving the airport its unique, bustling charm. Michael adjusted the straps of his carry-on backpack while Sarah clutched her tote bag, filled with last-minute souvenirs and snacks for the flight. "Finally, we're heading home," Sarah said, her voice filled with relief. She brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear and looked around at the vast, modern airport terminal before them. It was busy, as always, filled with travelers hurrying to catch their flights, families saying goodbyes, and airport staff moving briskly with a sense of purpose. Michael nodded. "Yeah, I just hope our flight is on time. You know how Denver can be, weather changes, delays." He trailed off, but Sarah waved his worry away. "It's fine, we've checked everything. Our bags are packed, tickets printed, and boarding passes ready. Let's just enjoy the last bit of this trip." The couple entered the terminal, their footsteps echoing softly on the polished floors. A wave of warmth from the interior welcomed them, contrasting with the chilly evening outside. The vast hall was filled with travelers pulling luggage, chatting with companions, or simply staring at the large digital boards displaying flight information. Children ran past, dragging parents along, while business travelers walked briskly, eyes glued to their phones. The noise was a mix of rolling suitcases, muted announcements, and distant laughter. Michael glanced at the electronic board showing departing flights. "Gate 32, not too far," he said. He tightened the handle of his backpack and started walking toward the escalator leading to the security checkpoint. Sarah followed closely, her steps light, but her eyes scanning the area. There was something comforting in the ordinary chaos of the airport, the regular people, the familiar sounds, the small routines that made the world feel predictable. They joined the line at the security checkpoint. The line moved steadily, with TSA officers guiding travelers and calling out instructions. Michael handed over their IDs and boarding passes, while Sarah placed her tote on the conveyor belt. Shoes off, jackets off, belts unbuckled. The routine felt long but strangely meditative. As their belongings passed through the scanner, a wave of relief washed over them. It was one more step closer to home. "You know," Michael said as they waited for their items, "I'm going to miss this trip. The mountains, the small cafes, the parks, Denver has been amazing." Sarah smiled. "I know, but we'll have memories and photos. That counts for a lot. Plus, home has its comforts, our own bed, our cat waiting for us, and Mom's cooking." They laughed together, their laughter blending into the ambient hum of the airport. It was ordinary, safe, and completely mundane. They didn't notice the man standing nearby, watching them for just a moment longer than usual, or the woman passing by who glanced back with a puzzled look before continuing on her way. Everything seemed normal. Cleared through security, they gathered their belongings and adjusted their bags. "Snack first," Sarah suggested. "I saw a little cafe near our gate," Michael agreed. They wandered toward the cafe, weaving through the crowd. The aroma of fresh bread and coffee greeted them, and they each ordered a cup of hot chocolate. Sarah chose a small muffin while Michael picked a croissant. Sitting at a small table by the window, they watched travelers move past. Some were rushing, some were dawdling, some were saying emotional goodbyes. For Michael and Sarah, it was a chance to pause, even for just a few minutes, and enjoy the calm before the flight. While they sipped their drinks, a flight announcement echoed over the speakers. "Flight 482 to New York now boarding at Gate 32. All passengers, please proceed to the gate." "That's us," Michael said, setting down his cup. They gathered their things and left the cafe, moving toward their gate. The terminal was slightly less crowded in this direction, giving a sense of personal space amid the busy airport. Michael held Sarah's hand as they walked, a small gesture of comfort and connection. As they approached Gate 32, Sarah noticed a man in a security uniform walking past with a handheld scanner. "Everything seems calm," she said, smiling. The usual airport bustle continued, but nothing seemed unusual. Travelers were waiting, talking, checking their phones, or reading books. The world felt entirely normal. They found seats near the gate and sat down. Michael glanced at his watch. "We have a few minutes before boarding. Maybe I'll take a quick call to Mom, let her know we're almost home." Sarah nodded, pulling out her phone. As Michael called his mother, Sarah watched the travelers around them. She saw a young woman nervously checking her boarding pass, a businessman typing furiously on his laptop, and a little boy tugging at his father's hand. It was ordinary, everyday life, but somehow comforting in its routine. Michael's conversation was light and cheerful. "Hey, Mom, we're almost at the gate. Flight's on time. Yes, we'll be home soon. Love you too." He hung up and leaned back in his chair, stretching. Mom sounded happy, he said. "She's probably counting down the minutes." "Me too," Sarah said, smiling. She tucked her hair behind her ear and adjusted her tote bag. "It's been a good trip. I'm glad we did this, but I'm also ready for home." As they waited, a small child ran past them, chasing a paper airplane another kid had thrown. A brief smile crossed Sarah's face. The little moments, laughing children, people talking, the smell of coffee, made the world feel alive and familiar. She felt safe. She felt ordinary. Minutes passed, and the boarding announcement came again. "Flight 482 to New York is now boarding. All passengers, please have your boarding passes ready." Michael and Sarah stood up, gathering their bags. They moved closer to the gate, showing their passes to the airline staff. A gentle push through the crowd, a nod from a flight attendant, and they were stepping onto the jet bridge. The air felt slightly cooler here, with the faint scent of airplane fuel mixed with the lingering aroma of coffee. They paused for a moment, looking out through the windows of the jet bridge. The sun had dipped further, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The airport below was a web of lights, taxis, buses, and moving people. It was beautiful in a strange, mechanical way. "This is it," Michael said softly, gripping Sarah's hand. "Next stop, home." Sarah nodded, taking a deep breath. She felt the faint thrill of flying again, the slight unease that always accompanied travel, but mostly she felt content. She looked around, noticing the other travelers moving through the jet bridge, some smiling, some lost in thought, some tired. Each had their own story, their own destination, their own little universe in motion. As they reached the entrance to the plane, a flight attendant greeted them with a smile. "Welcome aboard. Can I see your boarding passes, please?" Michael handed over the passes. "Here you go," he said. "Thank you. Enjoy your flight." The attendant stepped aside, gesturing for them to move forward. They stepped onto the plane, finding their seats near the window. Michael placed his backpack in the overhead compartment, while Sarah settled in, adjusting her seatbelt. The hum of the plane's systems filled the cabin. Outside, the lights of the airport stretched endlessly, twinkling like stars on the ground. They exchanged a brief look, smiling at each other. "Ready for takeoff?" Michael asked. Sarah nodded. "Ready." The plane's engines roared to life as passengers settled in. Flight attendants moved up and down the aisle, checking safety equipment, offering smiles and reassuring passengers. The plane began to taxi toward the runway, the lights on the tarmac reflecting in the large windows. Michael glanced at Sarah. "It feels strange, doesn't it? Just minutes ago we were walking through the terminal and now we're about to leave the ground." Sarah smiled. "Life moves fast," she said softly. "Sometimes you don't even notice the little moments until later." The plane picked up speed and soon they were airborne, gliding into the twilight sky. The city below grew smaller, lights blinking in the distance until Denver became a patchwork of shapes and shadows. For a few moments everything felt perfect, ordinary, safe, familiar. The gentle vibration of the plane, the distant clouds, and the hum of engines formed a rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. Michael and Sarah leaned back in their seats, holding hands, enjoying the final moments of peace before the flight. And at that very moment, no one in the airport could have imagined what would happen next. How a routine, ordinary journey could suddenly take a mysterious and unexplainable turn. But for now, Michael and Sarah simply enjoyed the calm, unaware of the strange chain of events that were about to unfold just minutes later. The hum of the airplane's engines was steady, a comforting rhythm that usually signaled the beginning of a smooth journey home. Michael and Sarah sat near the window, still holding hands, smiling at each other, and chatting quietly about the trip. Outside, the city lights of Denver had become tiny, flickering dots, and the horizon glowed with the last shades of the sunset. Everything seemed ordinary, peaceful, and completely normal. But back in the terminal, an unusual tension began to ripple through the air. The security staff noticed something strange near the gate where Michael and Sarah had just boarded. Surveillance cameras captured fleeting images of them as they had moved through the jet bridge. But for a brief, unexplainable moment, the footage showed an empty space where they should have been. The gap lasted only a few seconds, and anyone watching the monitors in real time might have dismissed it as a technical glitch. But the staff noticed. Meanwhile, Michael and Sarah continued talking, unaware of the stir their departure was already causing. They joked about how slow boarding sometimes felt, how people always seemed to rush to the plane, and how excited they were to be home. Michael leaned over and glanced at the seatback pocket in front of him. "You think the pilot knows how many passengers are on board already?" he asked, half joking. Sarah laughed softly. "I guess we'll find out soon enough." As the flight attendants completed their checks and moved toward the front of the plane, a faint sense of unease began to creep into the cabin. Nothing alarming, just tiny details that made the air feel different, an unusual silence from passengers near the back, a flight attendant glancing slightly over their shoulder, a flicker in the lights above. Michael noticed it too. "Did you see that?" he whispered, nodding toward the back of the cabin. Sarah shook her head. "See what?" "Nothing, probably just me being paranoid," Michael said, trying to brush it off. But the small feeling of unease lingered, like a shadow that could not be ignored. The plane continued its ascent, climbing above the clouds. Sarah pressed her forehead gently against the cool window and watched the darkness below. It was beautiful, quiet, peaceful, endless. Yet even in the midst of such calm, the strange tension in the airport below had started to grow. Security personnel were checking lists, double-checking boarding passes, and calling colleagues to verify details. Something was not right. Back in the terminal, a passenger had approached one of the gate attendants, asking about the couple who had just boarded. "I thought I saw them walking down the aisle," the passenger said nervously, "but when I turned around, they weren't there. Are they on the flight?" The attendant frowned, checking the passenger list and scanning the boarding passes once more. "Yes, they should be," she replied. But when she reviewed the cameras again, she noticed the same odd gap, brief, fleeting, and impossible to explain. Panic began to build in the small control room as staff compared the flight manifest with what was captured on surveillance footage. Meanwhile, Michael and Sarah had settled into the steady hum of the plane. They laughed quietly about a small incident on their trip, how Michael had accidentally gotten lost in a Denver park while trying to take a shortcut, and how Sarah had waited patiently, enjoying the sunset until he finally appeared, looking sheepish but happy. It was a memory that made them both smile, a reminder of the simple joys of their journey. But as the plane leveled off, something unusual occurred. A flicker of light passed across their window, brief and almost imperceptible, as if the clouds outside had momentarily shimmered with a strange glow. Sarah blinked and shook her head. "Did you see that?" she asked. Michael looked out as well. "See what?" he said, but his eyes betrayed a hint of concern. The light had vanished, leaving only the soft, ordinary darkness of the sky above the city. They both shrugged and returned to their conversation, trying not to let the strange moment distract them. The flight attendants began moving down the aisle, offering drinks and snacks. Michael ordered water, Sarah chose a small bottle of juice. The normalcy of the routine, the quiet murmur of passengers, the clink of cups and trays, the soft rustle of seatbelts being adjusted, was reassuring. Yet in the airport below, the scene had shifted from confusion to alarm. Security officers were now actively searching for the couple. Walkie-talkies crackled, supervisors coordinated with airline staff, and the announcement systems were checked to ensure there had been no errors in boarding procedures. Every second that passed without explanation intensified the mystery. Back on the plane, Michael and Sarah finally leaned back, exhausted from a week of adventures and the minor stresses of travel. They didn't notice the subtle changes, the slight hush in the cabin, the way the passengers around them seemed unusually still, almost too still, and how a few of the flight attendants occasionally glanced at them with unspoken concern. Sarah looked down at her tote bag, realizing she had forgotten to grab a snack for the flight. She started to reach in, but her hand froze for a moment. Something was off. The bag felt lighter than it should, and a small item, her notebook, was missing. She frowned, trying to remember placing it inside. Michael noticed her hesitation. "What's wrong?" I don't know. I thought I packed my notebook, but it's not here," she said. Michael shrugged. "Maybe it's in the other compartment or under your seat." They both checked, but the notebook was nowhere to be found. Strange, but not alarming enough to worry yet. They settled again, assuming it had simply fallen somewhere along the way. Minutes later, the captain's voice came over the intercom, calm and professional. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our initial descent. Weather is clear and we expect a smooth landing. Thank you for flying with us." Michael and Sarah exchanged relieved smiles. Home was getting closer. The journey that had felt so ordinary, the excitement of returning, the comfort of routine, was about to conclude. But the sense of normalcy was deceiving. In the control room of the airport, authorities had now coordinated with local police and airline management. They began to review every possible scenario. Did the couple somehow wander into a restricted area before boarding? Did a clerical error occur with the flight manifest? Nothing seemed to fit. Every check, every review of footage confirmed one unshakable fact: the couple had disappeared. Back on the plane, Michael and Sarah continued their small, casual conversations, unaware of the chaos below. They talked about their favorite parts of the trip: the food, the scenery, and the people they had met. Sarah smiled at a funny memory, and Michael laughed, squeezing her hand lightly. Outside, the evening sky was clear, and the moon was rising, casting a gentle silver light across the clouds. The world below seemed calm and ordinary. Yet down on the ground, airport staff scoured every corner of the terminal, checking the gates, questioning passengers, and reviewing every inch of surveillance footage. The mysterious disappearance created a ripple that spread quickly. Airline staff contacted family members, and soon social media began buzzing with speculation. "Have you seen this?" one post read. "A couple vanished at Denver airport. How is that even possible?" Meanwhile, Michael and Sarah remained blissfully unaware. They leaned back in their seats, sharing memories, holding hands, and looking forward to the warmth and familiarity of home. Their lives, their thoughts, and their plans were ordinary, completely normal, and yet the ordinary world around them had subtly shifted. The ordinary airport, the ordinary flight, the ordinary moments, they were all part of a story that had now taken a mysterious turn, one that neither Michael nor Sarah could have anticipated. As the plane began its final approach to New York, a gentle vibration ran through the cabin. Passengers adjusted, some looking out the windows at the approaching city lights. Michael and Sarah, however, remained engrossed in each other, talking quietly about their future plans, unaware that the ordinary journey had already become anything but ordinary. The moment was fleeting, the calm before an event that would later be described as baffling, unexplained, and unforgettable. And while Michael and Sarah prepared for the simple, joyful reunion with family and friends, the mystery of their disappearance continued to unfold miles below, in the vast, crowded, and now restless airport terminal. It was a disappearance that would puzzle authorities, worry loved ones, and leave everyone involved with the haunting question: how could two ordinary travelers vanish in the middle of a normal, everyday airport in broad daylight without a trace? The airport buzzed with normal activity, yet the shadow of uncertainty hung over every gate, every terminal corridor, every security checkpoint. And while life on the plane moved steadily toward landing, the ordinary, familiar world below was now caught in a strange, silent storm, one in which Michael and Sarah's ordinary lives had suddenly been suspended in a way that no one could explain. The disappearance of Michael and Sarah had sent ripples of confusion and alarm throughout Denver International Airport. The initial shock among airport staff quickly escalated into a full-scale investigation. Security officers, airline personnel, and local police moved with urgency, retracing the couple's steps and checking every corner of the terminal. What had started as an ordinary day for the airport now felt tense, almost surreal. Back in the control room, officers stared at the surveillance monitors, their brows furrowed. Every camera angle was reviewed again and again. The footage showed Michael and Sarah entering the jet bridge, smiling and chatting like any normal passengers. But then, inexplicably, there was a gap, just a few seconds where the couple seemed to vanish. No one on the monitors could explain it. Every possible scenario was considered. Perhaps the footage was corrupted. Perhaps there had been a technical malfunction, but when multiple cameras were checked, the gap remained. One of the senior security officers, a man named Officer Daniels, rubbed his temples. "I've never seen anything like this," he muttered to his colleague. "We've got two people, they scan through security, board the plane, and then nothing. Not a trace in the terminal, not a trace in the jet bridge, and the boarding passes show they should be on the flight." His colleague shook his head. We need to contact the airline and confirm with the flight crew. Maybe they are on board and we're missing something. Meanwhile, airline staff on the flight had already noticed something unusual. Michael and Sarah were seated near the window, calm and normal, but cabin crew reported a brief flicker on the flight manifests. It was a small anomaly, easy to dismiss under ordinary circumstances. Yet combined with the airport's surveillance footage, it became an unnerving pattern. Back at the airport, the scene had grown more chaotic. Police officers moved quickly through the terminal, speaking to passengers and staff alike. "Did anyone see where they went?" one officer asked, clipboard in hand. Travelers shook their heads, some confused, some worried. A few passengers claimed they remembered seeing the couple, but no one could provide any definitive clue. The families of Michael and Sarah were contacted by airline officials, and they arrived at the airport, faces pale and filled with concern. Michael's sister, Emma, paced nervously in the waiting area, her hands gripping her purse tightly. "They were just supposed to be on this flight," she said, voice trembling. "How could they just disappear?" Sarah's parents arrived shortly afterward, their expressions a mixture of fear and disbelief. "Are you sure they boarded?" her father asked an officer. "We spoke to them just a few hours ago. They were excited to come home. This doesn't make sense." Officer Daniels led them to a small room where they could explain what was known. "We've reviewed all the footage," he said carefully. "It appears that they entered the jet bridge and then there's a gap. We don't see them after that point. We are treating this as a high-priority investigation." The families listened, their anxiety mounting with each passing moment. Questions formed in their minds. How could this happen in a busy, modern airport? Was it an accident, or something more sinister? The answers were not coming, and the uncertainty was almost unbearable. Outside the airport, news crews began to arrive. Cameras rolled as reporters spoke into microphones, giving updates on the strange disappearance. Social media erupted with posts, speculations, and theories. People shared photos of the couple from their trip, trying to help spread information, while online forums buzzed with questions and wild guesses. Some suggested they had wandered into a restricted area, others speculated about abduction, and a few whispered about the unexplained or paranormal. Back in the airport, investigators worked tirelessly. They reviewed every possible angle: the ticketing process, security scans, boarding procedures, and employee logs. Nothing provided a clear answer. Michael and Sarah seemed to have moved through the system normally. Every check, every step of the process, confirmed that they had entered the flight, but no one could account for the mysterious disappearance. Officer Daniels called for a meeting with all parties involved: airline officials, local police, and airport management. "We need to consider all possibilities," he said. "We have to rule out human error, technological error, and any other explanations. At this point, nothing can be ignored." Theories began to emerge among the team. One suggested that perhaps the couple had accidentally entered a restricted maintenance area, though this seemed unlikely given the security presence. Another proposed a clerical error. Maybe they had been accidentally checked onto another flight, but the flight manifest and surveillance footage contradicted that. Each idea was tested and quickly dismissed, leaving the investigators frustrated and tense. Meanwhile, the families struggled to process what was happening. They clung to each other, trying to stay calm despite the growing fear. Emma sat in a corner, scrolling through the couple's recent messages and photos, hoping for any clue. Sarah's mother paced back and forth, muttering prayers under her breath. Michael's father stood silently, staring at the surveillance screens as if he could somehow will them to reveal the truth. Hours passed, and still there was no explanation. The airport remained functional, but the energy had shifted. Where once there had been a sense of routine and order, there was now tension and unease. Every announcement over the loudspeakers, every passing security officer, every unfamiliar movement in the terminal seemed heightened, amplified by the mystery that had taken hold. In a small corner office, an airline manager reviewed the situation with a team of staff. "We have to manage this carefully," he said. "Passengers are watching, families are worried, and the media is already here. At the same time, we need to continue our normal operations and ensure no further confusion occurs." The investigation team decided to interview everyone who had come into contact with Michael and Sarah that day: ticket agents, security staff, gate attendants, cafe employees, and even passengers who had been nearby. Each account confirmed the same sequence of events. Michael and Sarah had been seen moving through the airport, chatting, relaxed, entirely ordinary. No one reported anything unusual. One officer, a young woman named Officer Ruiz, noted something strange. "It's almost as if they vanished into thin air," she said quietly. Her colleagues exchanged glances, but no one wanted to speak the thought aloud. It was unthinkable, impossible, and yet every fact pointed to the same uncomfortable conclusion. The couple had disappeared without explanation. The media coverage intensified. Reporters interviewed passengers who had been at the gate, sharing every detail they could recall. Some spoke of brief glances, fleeting shadows, or minor oddities they hadn't noticed at the time. Every retelling added to the mystique, each version slightly different, making it harder to separate fact from speculation. Meanwhile, investigators began looking for external explanations. Were there hidden passages in the terminal? Could someone have intercepted the couple before boarding? They checked security logs, maintenance doors, and restricted areas. Everything was accounted for. Every possibility seemed to hit a dead end. Late into the night, the airport remained active, but the atmosphere had changed. The lights were still bright, the screens still flashed flight information, and the PA system continued its routine announcements. Yet a subtle shadow hung over the terminal, a reminder that something inexplicable had occurred. Staff moved with caution, passengers whispered anxiously, and the families continued to wait, hoping, fearing, and praying for answers. Some staff began to suggest more unusual explanations, carefully and quietly. "Maybe it's a glitch we don't understand," one said, or "something beyond our normal experience." The words hung in the air, unspoken yet heavy with implication. It was a thought no one wanted to confront fully, but in the absence of any rational explanation, it lingered. At home, friends and relatives of Michael and Sarah gathered, watching news updates and sharing their disbelief. Phones rang constantly as family members tried to get updates, call authorities, and piece together the timeline. Social media posts added to the sense of urgency, with strangers offering help, sharing advice, and speculating wildly. Back in the airport, the investigation continued into the early hours. Officers reviewed footage repeatedly, checking every angle every second. Supervisors coordinated with external agencies, including the airline headquarters and law enforcement in other cities. Emails were sent, phone calls made, all in the hope of finding the missing couple. But despite every effort, the truth remained elusive. Michael and Sarah's disappearance was baffling, unexplained, and frightening. There were no signs of struggle, no clues left behind, and no trace of where they had gone. The ordinary sequence of events, the routine of the airport, the predictable movements of travelers, had been interrupted by something that defied explanation. And while the world below the plane continued to spin in ordinary rhythm, above it, Michael and Sarah remained unaware of the chaos unfolding in their absence. They had entered the journey with excitement and expectation, only to have their story take a mysterious turn that would puzzle authorities, worry families, and captivate the public imagination for years to come. As dawn approached over Denver, the terminal lights reflected off the polished floors, casting long shadows. Airport staff remained vigilant, families continued to search, and the investigation pressed forward, driven by the hope that some clue, some small detail would eventually explain the unexplainable. Theories would come and go. Speculation would spread. But for now, the mystery of Michael and Sarah's disappearance remained as strong, as confounding, and as urgent as ever. A story that began as an ordinary day in the Denver airport and had grown into something far stranger than anyone could have imagined. The days that followed. Michael and Sarah's disappearance were filled with tension, worry, and a growing sense of mystery. Denver International Airport had become a hub of investigation and speculation. News crews set up cameras near the terminal entrances, reporting live updates to viewers across the country. Social media continued to buzz with theories, some reasonable and some wild. "How can two people vanish in a busy airport?" one post asked. Another read, "This is a real-life mystery no one can explain." Inside the airport, officers worked tirelessly, reviewing surveillance footage frame by frame. Every angle was scrutinized repeatedly, every detail double-checked. They spoke to every employee who had interacted with the couple, from ticketing agents to cafe staff. Yet no new evidence emerged. Michael and Sarah had followed every step of the boarding process correctly. They had shown no signs of distress, hesitation, or distraction. It was as if the couple had simply vanished into thin air. Families remained on edge. Michael's sister, Emma, refused to leave the airport, hoping for any news. Sarah's parents took turns sitting in a quiet corner, holding hands and praying for their daughter's safety. Every phone call, every update brought a wave of hope and then disappointment. Maybe they're just delayed, someone suggested. But hours stretched into days, and still there was no explanation. The airport administration decided to cooperate fully with local and federal authorities. Special investigation teams were brought in, including experts in airport security and forensic analysis. They checked every possible explanation: hidden doors, restricted areas, maintenance tunnels, and even staff-only corridors. Every inch of the terminal was examined, yet nothing was found. No traces of Michael or Sarah were discovered anywhere in the building. One investigator, a woman named Agent Ramirez, leaned back in her chair, rubbing her eyes from exhaustion. "It's the most unusual case I've ever seen," she said quietly to a colleague. "We've considered every possibility: technical error, human error, miscommunication, and still, nothing makes sense." The media coverage intensified. Every day, news channels reported live from the airport, interviewing security staff, family members, and witnesses. Speculation ran wild. Some suggested the couple might have been abducted, though no evidence supported this. Others proposed a mysterious glitch in the boarding process, a mistake so rare it seemed impossible. And a few hinted at the unexplainable: strange occurrences, phenomena beyond understanding. Meanwhile, the airport tried to maintain normal operations. Flights continued, passengers moved through the terminals, and the hum of daily activity returned, but the shadow of the disappearance lingered. Staff were more alert than ever, checking boarding passes twice, monitoring cameras closely, and coordinating with authorities. The once ordinary terminal now carried an air of caution and unease. As the investigation continued, authorities explored more unusual explanations. Some theories were simple. Perhaps the couple had wandered into a maintenance area and become trapped. Perhaps they had mistakenly boarded another flight. Yet these possibilities were quickly dismissed after thorough checks. Maintenance areas were empty, and flight manifests from all nearby flights showed no signs of Michael or Sarah. Family members struggled to cope. Emma sat in the airport lounge, scrolling through her phone, trying to find any clue. She looked at photos of the couple from their trip, smiling faces at restaurants, hiking in the mountains, relaxing in their hotel room. Each photo was a reminder of their ordinary, happy life, and the stark contrast to their sudden disappearance was almost unbearable. Sarah's mother, Mrs. Thompson, could not stop praying. She visited the airport chapel multiple times a day, lighting candles and whispering prayers for her daughter's safety. "Please bring them back to us," she murmured, tears running down her cheeks. Her husband, Mr. Thompson, tried to stay calm, but the worry was written across his face. He walked the terminal endlessly, checking with authorities, hoping that some piece of information had been overlooked. As hours turned into days, a breakthrough finally came, not in the form of a direct clue about Michael and Sarah's whereabouts, but through a small observation in the surveillance footage. A security officer noticed something odd. At the very moment of the disappearance, the couple seemed to step into a shadowed area near the jet bridge. The shadow flickered, almost as if light itself had shifted strangely around them. It lasted only a second, but it was enough to draw attention. Agent Ramirez and her team examined this anomaly carefully. "It's subtle," she explained, "but there's a moment in the footage where something seems to obscure them entirely. Not a person, not a door, just nothing." The discovery deepened the mystery. It was not evidence of human error nor an accident. It was something entirely unexplainable. The investigators considered every possible scientific and technical explanation: camera glitches, lighting anomalies, optical illusions, but none could fully account for what they saw. As the story spread, public interest grew. People across the country followed every update, sharing theories and speculations. Some suggested secret government involvement, unusual technology, or even a phenomenon that defied understanding. While some dismissed these ideas as far-fetched, others wondered if the disappearance was more than a simple accident. Despite the ongoing investigation, the families refused to give up hope. They met daily with authorities, offered any information that might help, and stayed close to the airport, waiting for answers. They clung to the belief that Michael and Sarah were safe somewhere, even if no one could yet explain where. Days passed, and the airport slowly returned to its usual rhythm, though the memory of the disappearance remained. Travelers moved through the terminals with heightened awareness, staff remained vigilant, and every new passenger brought questions. Could they disappear too? Could the ordinary act of entering an airport suddenly become dangerous? Authorities continued their search, not just at Denver Airport, but across the surrounding area. They checked transportation routes, nearby roads, and even airports in other states. Every avenue was explored, every lead followed. Yet Michael and Sarah were nowhere to be found. The families turned to media coverage to appeal for help. Television interviews, newspaper articles, and social media posts begged for information. "Please, if anyone has seen them, contact the authorities," Michael's father pleaded during one interview. "They are ordinary people just trying to come home. We need them back." Even with all these efforts, the mystery deepened. Witnesses who had been at the gate described the couple in contradictory ways. Some remembered seeing them smiling, chatting normally. Others claimed they seemed distracted, almost as if they were aware of something unseen. The details varied, but one fact remained constant. No one could explain how Michael and Sarah had vanished. Investigators decided to expand the search. They brought in experts in unusual events and consulted with psychologists, security specialists, and airport engineers. Everyone agreed on one point: it was extraordinary. Nothing in the history of Denver International Airport or any other major airport had suggested that such a disappearance was possible. Weeks passed. The investigation continued, but so far no concrete evidence had been found. Authorities remained hopeful, believing that some clue would eventually surface. Families remained vigilant, refusing to leave, hoping that Michael and Sarah might be found alive. Friends and relatives organized support groups, shared information online, and worked tirelessly to keep the search alive. Then, months later, a small clue finally emerged. A piece of personal property, a notebook that had been carried by Sarah, was discovered in an unexpected location, a storage area near the airport, far from any public access. It was intact, with nothing missing except for a small, unreadable note inside. The handwriting was familiar, but the message was cryptic. It spoke of being somewhere else, of time and space bending, and of a place that was both familiar and strange. This discovery confirmed what authorities had feared and wondered. Michael and Sarah's disappearance was not ordinary. It was not the result of a simple mistake or human error. Something had happened that defied explanation, something that seemed to exist outside normal understanding. Despite this, the families clung to hope. They shared the notebook with investigators, examined every detail, and discussed its contents endlessly. Each reading brought a sense of awe and fear. While the words did not provide a clear answer, they suggested that Michael and Sarah were aware of what had happened, that they had experienced something extraordinary. The airport itself slowly returned to normal operations, though the memory of the disappearance remained in the minds of staff and travelers. Security protocols were reviewed, surveillance systems upgraded, and staff trained to handle unusual situations. Yet despite every effort, the mystery of Michael and Sarah remained unsolved. The story captured the imagination of people worldwide. Authors wrote articles and books, journalists produced documentaries, and online communities debated the possibilities. The disappearance became a modern mystery, one that would be discussed for years. A story that began with an ordinary day at Denver Airport and ended in something extraordinary, inexplicable, and haunting. For the families, life was a mix of hope and grief. They continued to wait, to pray, and to search. They remembered Michael and Sarah not only as missing travelers, but as people who had been part of their lives, ordinary individuals caught in an extraordinary circumstance. And so, the mystery endured. Michael and Sarah's disappearance remained unsolved, a puzzle that challenged the understanding of everyone involved. It was a reminder that even in the most ordinary places, an airport, a routine journey, a simple act of walking to catch a flight, life could suddenly take a turn that no one could predict, explain, or fully understand. The notebook, the surveillance footage, and the memories of those who had seen them were the only traces left behind. Every effort to explain, every theory, every investigation brought some insight but no final answer. And while the world continued to turn, Michael and Sarah's fate remained a story of wonder, fear, and endless curiosity. A reminder that sometimes, the ordinary world hides mysteries far beyond imagination.